Welcome to a journey through Louisiana's most disturbing case. Before we start, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. We want to know what places around the world these true stories reach and what time of day or night you're listening. The missing records. The St. Martin Parish Courthouse has a strange gap in its records. Papers from spring 1843 to late summer 1845 are completely missing. For many years, people thought these papers were damaged by wetness or lost because record-keeping was messy before the Civil War in Louisiana. But in 1962, something changed. Workers were fixing up the courthouse basement when they found a sealed metal box hidden behind a brick wall. The wall looked newer than the rest of the building. Inside the box, they found handwritten stories, official papers, and a leather book with dark stains around the edges. The county clerk who first looked at these papers asked for them to be sealed up again and stored away from public records. No one touched them until 1965, when Professor James Whitmore from Tulane University got permission to look at them. He said he wanted to organize them for historical records. The papers were never shown to the public. In 1968, a small fire in the storage room reportedly destroyed several boxes of old materials. According to official reports, this collection was destroyed in that fire. However, Professor Whitmore's detailed notes survived. They tell the story of what local people once called the Bride of Bayou, a tale that was purposely erased from official history. The story begins with Meline. The story starts with a name, Meline. According to the 1900 count of most popular girls' names in Louisiana, Meline was the 27th most common name. In the spring of 1843, Meline Reynolds came to St. Martinville, a small but successful town along Bayou, about 15 miles from New Iberia. She came as the new wife of Harold Walker, who owned Oak Shadow Plantation, one of the biggest sugarcane farms in the area. Harold Walker was 47 years old and had been a widower for 3 years. His first wife, Caroline, had died from what the local doctor wrote down as too much sadness leading to body sickness. This was a common explanation back then for what we now know as severe depression. Harold had traveled to Charleston, South Carolina 4 months earlier and came back with a new bride who was almost half his age. According to letters and journal entries from women at nearby plantations, people described Meline as very beautiful, with a strange intensity in her eyes. She was educated, well-spoken, and seemed to quickly learn her role as Lady of Oak Shadow, even though she had never managed such a large household before. Oak Shadow Plantation. Oak Shadow had 48 enslaved people working there, which was unusually high for a plantation its size. According to tax records from that time, Harold Walker was known for buying troubled workers. He would buy enslaved people who had tried to escape or fought back, usually at lower prices. In a letter dated April 7, 1843, Margaret Beauchamp, wife of a nearby plantation owner, wrote to her sister in Baton Rouge, "The new Mrs. Walker has taken to her duties with unusual energy. Harold seems very happy with his choice, though I must say there is something in her manner that makes me feel like I'm being studied rather than talked to." She asks questions that ladies rarely concern themselves with, about managing field workers and punishment methods. The overseer's concerns, the plantation overseer, a man named Thomas Hebert, had worked at Oak Shadow for 11 years. According to testimony he later gave to the parish sheriff, Hebert thought Meline's interest in plantation work was not suitable for a lady of her position. But Harold insisted he answer any questions his new wife had. During her first weeks at Oak Shadow, people noticed Meline spending long periods walking around the property. She showed special interest in the far eastern edge where the farm fields ended and the cypress swamp began. This area, locally called Le Fin de Terre, the end of the earth, was considered useless land where the plantation's boundary disappeared into the murky waters of the Bayou. The first strange event. The first unusual thing happened about 6 weeks after Meline arrived. An enslaved woman named Ruth who worked in the main house told Hebert that several items had gone missing from the kitchen. Specifically, a large butcher's knife, rope, and a bottle of medicine that Harold used for his foot pain. Hebert later remembered that when he mentioned this to Meline, she didn't seem concerned. She suggested that perhaps one of the house girls misplaced them during cleaning. No search was done and the matter was apparently forgotten. The first disappearance in early May 1843, a field worker named Solomon was reported missing. Solomon had been bought by Walker the year before and had already tried to escape twice. His disappearance wasn't treated as unusual at first. Walker ordered the normal search of nearby properties and posted a $20 reward for his return. After 3 days with no sightings, Hebert organized a more complete search with dogs. The dogs followed Solomon's scent to the edge of the swampland but refused to go further. They became upset and wouldn't cooperate. This was noted as strange because these same dogs had previously tracked runaways deep into swamp territory. Harold Walker, according to Hebert's journal, was prepared to accept the loss and file an insurance claim for the escaped worker. It was Moline who insisted the search continue. In what was described as an unusual show of feminine determination, she personally offered an extra $30 from her own money to anyone who could find Solomon or provide information about where he went. No one ever claimed this reward. Solomon was never found. More disappearances. 3 weeks later, another person disappeared. This time it was a house servant named Mary, who had been taking care of Moline's personal needs. According to kitchen staff, Mary had been called to Moline's private sitting room the evening before she was found to be missing. No one saw her leave the main house. Unlike Solomon, Mary had no history of trying to escape. She had been born on the plantation and had family among the enslaved community. A mother, 2 sisters, and a young child who was 4 years old. When questioned by Hebert, Moline said she had sent Mary away early because she had a headache and wanted to be alone. She seemed surprised that the woman had disappeared and suggested that maybe Solomon had come back and convinced her to leave with him. The search for Mary was less intense than the search for Solomon. Without a history of running away, people first thought she was hiding somewhere on the property, possibly afraid of punishment for some unknown mistake. After 5 days, Harold Walker considered the matter closed and assigned another house servant, Esther, to replace Mary in taking care of Moline. Strange sounds from the swamp. It was around this time that the first reports of strange sounds coming from the swamp began. Several field workers claimed to have heard a woman's cries coming from deep within the cypress trees after sunset. Hebert dismissed these reports as superstition. He wrote in his journal that, "The workers have become overly upset by these disappearances and are now finding scares in every night sound of the Bayou. Changes at Oak Shadow by mid-June." The feeling at Oak Shadow had noticeably changed, according to letters from neighboring plantations. The field workers were working with unusual silence, and they were getting more work done despite the summer heat. Hebert noted with satisfaction that punishment incidents had decreased by nearly half. When Harold's brother, William Walker, visited from New Orleans in late June, he commented in a letter to a business associate that Harold's new bride has brought remarkable discipline to the operation. The enslaved people seem almost afraid of disappointing her, though I have not seen her use any unusual punishment methods. William also mentioned that his brother seemed somewhat diminished since his marriage. He described him as quieter than I remember, and seemingly happy to let Moline make decisions in matters I would have expected him to control firmly. He noted that Harold had developed a constant cough and had lost weight, which Moline said was because the summer humidity was making his health worse. Another disappearance on July 2, 1843. A field worker named Isaac failed to appear for morning roll call. Isaac was described in plantation records as strong-willed but reliable. He had been at Oak Shadow for 7 years. His disappearance was the third in less than 3 months. This time, Harold Walker ordered only a quick search of the immediate property before declaring Isaac a runaway. According to Hebert's journal, Moline showed little interest in this latest disappearance. She only commented that the heat and work drive some men to foolish decisions. Moline's journal, what happened next, is recorded in the most disturbing section of the recovered materials. Several pages from Moline's personal journal, which she apparently started keeping shortly after arriving at Oak Shadow. The handwriting is precise, almost like architectural drawing, with no fancy loops or decorations typical of women's handwriting from that time. The entry dated July 7th reads, "Harold continues to weaken despite the medicine. He questioned me about the noises from the eastern marsh last night. I told him it was just alligators during their mating season. He seemed unconvinced, but too tired to ask more questions. The medicine I have added to his evening drink makes sure he sleeps deeply enough not to be disturbed when I do my night work. The last one was difficult, stronger than I expected. I will choose more carefully next time. More strange sounds. By mid-July, reports of unusual sounds from the swamp had become common enough that even neighboring plantations had started to notice. In a letter to her cousin, Elizabeth Comeau, whose family owned land next to Oak Shadow's eastern boundary, described the most unsettling cries carrying across the water after midnight. The sounds are such that our dogs howl in response and cannot be quieted. Our overseer insists it is only herons or perhaps a panther, but I have lived beside this swamp my entire life and never heard anything like it. Harold's illness on July 23rd. Harold Walker became very sick with what was described as a wasting fever. The local doctor, Dr. Samuel Wilson, was called to see him. Dr. Wilson's notes, which were among the recovered documents, show he suspected tuberculosis. He noted the patient's severe weight loss, constant cough, and occasional blood in his spit. He prescribed rest, beef broth, and a standard medicine for pain and sleep. What Dr. Wilson found more noteworthy, however, was Maline's behavior. In a personal letter to a medical colleague in New Orleans, Dr. Wilson wrote, "The new Mrs. Walker shows none of the distress one would expect from a bride of barely 4 months whose husband is possibly dying. She receives my instructions with perfect calm and gives him his medicines herself, refusing even the help of house servants. Most strange was her single question, whether, in my opinion, a body buried in swamp water would rot faster than one in dry soil. She claimed the question was about a novel she had been reading, but I must say it left me uncomfortable. Harold's death during Harold's illness. No more disappearances were reported among the enslaved people. Hebert noted that work continued with unusual efficiency, and the enslaved people now moved in groups, never allowing anyone to be alone, especially near dusk or when working close to the swamp boundary. By early August, Harold's condition had gotten much worse. Dr. Wilson visited every third day, but his notes suggest he had little hope for recovery. He wrote on August 9th that the patient's decline speeds up beyond expectation. Mrs. Walker reports giving the prescribed treatments faithfully, yet I see no improvement. Indeed, quite the opposite. On August 15th, Harold Walker died in his bed at Oak Shadow Plantation. The official cause was recorded as tuberculosis, though Dr. Wilson privately expressed some doubt about how quickly the illness progressed. Maline arranged for a modest funeral, saying these were her husband's supposed wishes for simplicity. Harold was buried in the small Walker family cemetery on the plantation grounds. Maline inherits Oak Shadow. With Harold's death, Maline inherited full control of Oak Shadow. The couple had no children, and Harold had no surviving male relatives in Louisiana. His brother William, who might have challenged the inheritance, had returned to New Orleans. According to letters, he had himself fallen ill with what was described as a similar wasting condition shortly after his visit to Oak Shadow. The worst pattern of disappearances begins. It was after Harold's funeral that the most disturbing pattern of disappearances began. Between late August and early October 1843, 5 more enslaved people vanished from Oak Shadow. Unlike the earlier cases, these people had no history of trying to escape. They included an elderly man who had been at the plantation for over 20 years, a pregnant woman within weeks of having her baby, and a 14-year-old boy who worked in the stables. Hebert's journal entries from this period show increasing concern, not only about the disappearances but about Maline's management style. He wrote on September 12th, "Mrs. Walker insists on personally choosing which workers will work the eastern fields each day, a task previously left to my judgment. Her choices seem to follow no pattern I can figure out, sometimes choosing the strongest, other times selecting those who have shown the slightest rule-breaking. Those chosen often return from their day's work with a strange quietness about them. I have noticed that within a week of such special assignment, they often vanish. The sheriff's visit, by October, rumors had begun to spread beyond Oak Shadow. The parish sheriff, James Collins, received an anonymous letter claiming that murder most foul occurs at the Walker plantation, with the enslaved being killed by the mistress's own hand and fed to the creatures of the swamp. Collins dismissed this as mean gossip, likely from a business rival of the late Harold Walker. But he did make an unannounced visit to Oak Shadow on October 10th. Sheriff Collins' report, found among the recovered documents, states that he found nothing unusual at the plantation. He described Meline as a gracious widow managing admirably in difficult circumstances. He noted that she gave him a complete tour of the property, including the slave quarters, where he was free to speak with anyone. He did remark that the enslaved people seem unusually quiet, though well-fed and without visible signs of harsh treatment. What Collins did not include in his official report, but mentioned in a private letter to Judge Martin Voorhees, was that he declined Meline's invitation to inspect the eastern boundary of the property, saying he didn't have time. He admitted to the judge that something in the lady's too eager suggestion that we walk to the swamp's edge left me with a deep reluctance to do so. I cannot explain the feeling except to say that as we stood on the porch looking toward that cypress line, I felt I was being measured for something other than my official interest. Another disappearance. After the sheriff's visit, the day after Sheriff Collins' visit, an enslaved man named Daniel disappeared. Daniel had been one of the people the sheriff had spoken with during his inspection. According to accounts from other enslaved people later collected by Hebert, Daniel had told the sheriff that conditions at Oak Shadow were as well as could be expected, but had added, though some who go to work by the East Marsh never return to tell what they've seen, the overseer disappears 2 days later. The overseer Thomas Hebert himself vanished. This disappearance could not be explained away as an escape or typical plantation incident. Hebert was a free white man, respected in the community, with family in nearby New Iberia. His absence was noted when he failed to appear at a scheduled meeting with cotton dealers in St. Martinville on October 14. When questioned by a quickly formed search party of neighboring plantation owners, Meline claimed that Hebert had quit his job following a disagreement about plantation management. She produced a letter supposedly written by Hebert stating his plan to seek work in Mississippi. The handwriting was later questioned by Hebert's brother. Though no formal investigation was done at that time, the search party, led by Frederick Beauchamp from the neighboring plantation, insisted on examining Oak Shadow thoroughly, including the slave quarters and outbuildings. They found nothing unusual, though several members noted the extreme reluctance of the enslaved people to speak with them. Even when Meline was not present, Beauchamp later wrote to Sheriff Collins expressing his concerns. The entire plantation operates under a blanket of silence that I have never before witnessed. The field workers work with their eyes looking down, not even speaking among themselves. Most troubling was our approach to the eastern boundary where the property meets the cypress swamp. As we neared that line, our guides became so visibly upset that 2 women fell to their knees, refusing to go further. When we pressed for explanation, they would say only, "That's where the mistress takes them." The search party did not go into the swamp itself, as dusk was approaching and none were familiar enough with that particular section of Bayou to risk being there in darkness. They agreed to return the following day with boats and extra men. The night of strange lights. That night, according to statements later collected, strange lights were seen moving in the swamp. The sounds, described in different ways as wailing, screaming, and a woman singing in a foreign language, were heard by neighboring plantations as far as 2 miles away. Everyone disappears. The following morning, when Beauchamp returned with a larger group, including experienced swamp guides, they were met at Oak Shadow by a scene of bizarre emptiness. The main house stood with its doors open. No servants attended the grounds. The field workers were not at their morning stations. The entire enslaved population of Oak Shadow Plantation, 39 people at that time, was gone. So was Meline Walker. The search of the main house,